When your son asks, Mom, can we talk? Stop everything and listen. It's important.
Dear Family is a podcast hosted by Rachel Steinman, a writer, an educator, and a mental health advocate. And Rachel gets us up close and personal, so we feel a strong connection, familiarity, and comfort with her guests. So settle in and join us as we search for true healing and journey with Rachel and her most interesting guests.
Hello, everyone. I originally interviewed Tracy back in February before this unprecedented Black Swan pandemic event happened. And it was when her son, Will, had just 3 more months to go before graduating college. Now, more than ever, as our kids are beginning college and high school and middle school and elementary school, and maybe even preschool, their mental health is at the top of our minds. So many of these kids, they're starting school remotely, or if there's a hybrid model, it's not what it used to be. Our kids don't get to socialize like they used to, and a lot of things have been canceled, including sports. So it's really this new thing that we're having to deal with, and it's not easy. Well, today's Dear Family episode, it reminds us how our kids, they have to feel safe talking to us without any judgment. And when someone is depressed, the importance of acting. But the good news is that mental health issues can be addressed, and the sooner the better. So thank you so much for subscribing to Dear Family and giving me 5 stars and writing those amazing reviews. I really do put my heart and soul into this, and it really does help me get noticed and move up the charts. So thank you also for following me on social media platforms at Right Now Rachel. That's right with a W. Remember, your mental health, it's just as important as your physical health. So take care of yourself and check in on your loved ones, and enjoy this new Dear Family episode. Tracy Hargen is a born and bred Southern girl. Even though she did a stint in New York and New Jersey after meeting her Yankee husband, she currently lives in Georgia. She finds it hilarious when her gigantic Harlequin Great Dane and her tiny black and white Chinese Crested run through her office when she's on an important client call. Tracy has worked in corporate America for over 30 years, but her passions are writing and removing the shame and stigma around mental health issues. You can look for her work on grownandflown.com, themighty.com, lovewhatmatters.com, and in the books You Do You and Grown and Flown. Will, Tracy's youngest son, always seemed happy and involved in school activities. So when he asked, Mom, can we talk? She stopped and listened, ultimately helping him get out of the darkness of depression and feeling the light again. Tracy is a soon-to-be empty nester once again when Will, who moved home after graduating college in May, begins a consulting job in Boston. Tracy reminds us all that we don't always know what's behind happy faces, to check on our kids and our loved ones, and when your child asks for help or when anyone asks for help, stop everything and listen without judgment. It's important. Hi, Tracy.
Hey, Rachel. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. I'm so happy to have you. You know, I first read your essay in the Grown and Flown book, and I'm so grateful that Lisa Heffernan, who is the co-author of the book, Grown and Flown, who I also was very lucky to interview and whose podcast will be live by the time yours comes out, she suggested I reach out to you. I'm so glad I did, because the goal of this podcast is to let others understand that mental health is actually a family affair. And that's exactly what you're doing. And I'm really excited to talk more about it with you. But before we delve deep into why you wrote your essay, why don't you just start by telling us a little bit about yourself and about your family?
Sure. Married to my Yankee husband. About 30 years ago, we met at a corporate training, and we eloped within 6 months of meeting each other and never having lived in the same state. But we knew it was right, and turns out it was. We have 2 sons. One is at law school and graduating this year, and the other is William, whom we're here kind of to talk about, and he'll be graduating college this year. And I've been working in corporate America, as I said. That's really, how I spend most of my days. But it was the journey with Will that really brought my writing to the world, and a way to express what it's like to be part of a family that's going through depression and having mental health issues. I'll just say that as we got started on this journey, we quickly found what shame and stigma surround mental health. And so I really wanted to do this podcast with you because I love what you're doing with your podcast, and certainly our missions are aligned. So I'm so glad that Lisa connected us, because I think this is so important, and the only way to change the shame and the stigma and the narrative around mental health is to keep talking about it. So thank you.
Oh my God, thank you. And I couldn't agree more. And it's through personal stories that we understand behind often those like negative stereotypes are real people that can overcome obstacles. So I love that. Okay, well, Tracy, will you tell us about the moment that Will came to you?
Yeah. And so, I say sometimes when I'm talking to people that my journey with this started the night that Will walked into my room. I only found out later that his journey with depression had started years before. It was spring of his junior year, and he was studying and he was busy and he was doing activities with school and, just the busy lives that our kids lead when they're in high school. And he came into my room, and when he walked in, I could tell he kind of looked serious. And I thought, oh, he's really stressed about finals coming up, and he's trying to figure out what he's going to do this summer. All the things that moms kind of think when they see their kids and they're like, okay, what's going to happen here? And all these thoughts went through my head when he said, Mom, can we talk? And just the way he said it, he was very serious. So turned off the TV, turned up the light, and gave him my full attention and said, yeah, come sit down. What's going on? And as I said, I, kind of already had these preconceived ideas of what was going on. So I had no idea what he was going to say next, which was, I'm depressed. I'm very depressed, and I have been for a long time. And I can tell you that all these thoughts ran through my head, and I'm so glad that I didn't say anything. I really just for a minute sat there, which isn't like me. I usually kind of say what comes to my mind, and I'm glad I didn't, because my first thoughts were, oh no, honey, I'd know if you were depressed. I know you so well. You're fine. All these things that would have not been helpful. So I listened as he said this, and I said, okay, so tell me more about that. What's going on? Why are you depressed? And he started talking. So we sat there for probably an hour as he told me that he had been talking to one of his teachers that he really adored, and I did too. I knew exactly who he was talking about, and he had been talking to them, and they encouraged him the first day to tell us, and the second day basically insisted, and if you don't tell your parents, I'm going to, because you need help, and as much as I can listen, they're the only ones that can help you. When he told me, I think part of what surprised me was we're a very open family, so I couldn't understand for a minute, why hadn't he told me sooner? But again, thankfully, I didn't say that to him because that's not what he needed at that moment. But as we talked for a while, I did ask him, how long has this been going on? And at first he said, a year or so. But then later he said, Mom, I've felt this way since I was 9 years old.
Wow.
And he was 15 by now. 16. So, that just blew me away, Rachel, because I didn't see him. There were no outward signs that we saw of a depressed person. We have depression in our family, so I was familiar with what adult depression looked like. And, my view of that was someone who was very sad, couldn't get out of bed, no interest in their activities or their lives, hopeless feeling. And that did not describe my son in the least. In fact, he was getting up early and going to school and enjoying his friends and coming home. And in the evenings, I'd hear him in his room watching videos and laughing. And, he did not outwardly appear what I thought depression looked like. And so it wasn't until we really were talking, that he could express to me how he was feeling inside and how it maybe didn't manifest externally. And what I have found is that a lot of kids experience what my son experienced, and their parents have no idea. That's really what started me wanting to talk about this, because as you know, I wrote this post that Grown and Flown picked up, and it's in their book. And as people read that post and would reach out to me, they would say, I shared this with my son and he said he felt the same way. I didn't have any idea. So I could tell that there are people out there, particularly kids, that are suffering. They're suffering alone. They're suffering in silence. And that isolation is extremely harmful. And it's the telling someone and coming forward when they can actually get help. And that's why I feel so strongly about talking about it.
Tracy, I honestly, what you just said is so important for everyone to remember. I mean, behind happy faces sometimes are people that are really struggling. And it can often be your like strongest, most successful person you know in your life. Someone that just seems to have it all together, that is behind, again, that happy face is major struggles. So it's a really, really important reminder. And you said that you basically were in disbelief that your son was depressed because you just hadn't seen those warning signs. But now in retrospect, looking back, was there anything that maybe you had missed, or did he truly hide it?
He truly hid it. And I've asked him, was that intentional? Like, were you trying to put on a happy face, or you just didn't outwardly, express the depression? And did I miss any signs? Because it's been a few years now. So we've had lots of really honest conversations about this whole experience. And basically what he told me was, it wasn't that he was intentionally putting on a happy face around us. It's just that he said the two reasons he hadn't come out and told us was, one, he didn't understand it himself. And I think that's really important when you're talking about kids that are 9, 10, 11, 12, whatever, is that he looked around and said, I should be happy. I have everything anybody could ever want. I have a great family. I have a great home. He just looked around and outwardly said, I have all this. What is wrong with me? Why don't I feel happy? And what he felt was nothing. It's not that he felt sad and depressed. He just said he felt numb. Like there was this darkness that just followed him everywhere. And he thought he could just shake it off, that he'd grow out of it. And he just thought he was the only person who felt this way and didn't understand it. And he said, Mom, I couldn't put it into words because I couldn't even understand it myself. That was one piece. The other piece was, and this just broke my heart, Rachel, but he said, I didn't want you to worry. And it scared me so much. I was afraid if I voiced it out loud to you, that you would be as scared as I was. Oh. And I just thought, oh, gosh, he didn't want to burden me, but, what a burden to carry around. So that's why he finally told his teacher, and why he finally told us, is that he realized, like, I can't do this anymore. This is not normal. I don't know what's wrong with me, but I just need someone to help me with this. One of the ways I communicated with Will after he told me, as a mom, I wanted to ask him every minute of every day, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay now? Are you depressed? Right. You just want that reassurance. They're okay, but you can't do that. So I would find memes online and I'd set them on his desk and I would say, hey, is this you? And then we'd start talking. So it was a lot less direct, are you depressed? And one of them said, when I say I'm tired, what I mean is I'm depressed. And I thought back to all the times that he had said, I'm tired. Are you okay? I'm just tired. Hey, you look like you're, something's wrong. No, I'm just tired. So I think, kids use that a lot, and they probably are tired. I mean, our kids are so involved in so many things. They probably are tired, but for a lot of kids, that's a code for I'm feeling something I don't understand, or I'm depressed, or I'm sad. And so what I did notice as he started getting treatment and started getting better was I didn't hear, I'm tired so much anymore.
Yeah, I like the idea of approaching your child or teen or young adult with something that they could maybe relate to, like a meme, and also knowing that if they keep saying they're tired, that could be a warning sign. And again, it's
right.
why I think you and I both are so passionate about educating others, because even if our kids have the language to use, then they're not going to feel like they're burdening their parents. They're not going to feel like they're the only one, or the guilt or shame or all the things that they're feeling. And I also give Will a lot of credit for understanding that this is a story worth sharing. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. I know that you have said in the past that you believe parents shouldn't immediately jump into fix mode and should stop and listen, which is what you did. Because as parents, we just want to be like, oh, no, you're fine. And let's make sure I'll get you this or whatever. So why do you believe that's so important to just kind of step back for a second?
I think that when a child comes to you, when your young adult, teen, or even your adult child comes to you with something this big, all they really want in that moment is for you to hear them, to acknowledge them, and as you said in the introduction, to listen without judgment.
Right.
Because as soon as you say, oh, you're fine, or, oh, I can understand, I've been depressed before, or whatever you do to turn it away from them or to pacify them, what I thought is he's going to shut down. He is opening up to me. I need to keep that channel open. So I just need to listen and ask him some more questions to get him to keep talking. And I need to take this in, because if I respond with what I'm thinking right now, that's about me. And this situation is not about me at all. This is about him. And I don't understand it. So I need to keep asking questions until I do understand it. And then together we can talk about, okay, what do we do with this?
Right. And you also want him to come back to you again, right?
Yeah,
that's where I think the no judgment comes in. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So
with
important.
The trust and everything. Exactly. Tracy, I know that you work from home selling software, and you've been doing it as a full-time job for, I think you said 30 years. And you've mentioned that you're incredibly goal-driven. But when you decided to write, it became very deliberate, and you became a warrior for speaking up and speaking out. And you submitted a piece to CBS, and a producer called you. That's really like putting yourself out there. Why did you decide to not be anonymous and put a face to this?
Such a great question, because it would have been so easy just to stay in our little cocoon and work on Will and make sure he's fine and move on. But as I said in the beginning, I immediately saw the shame and stigma that surrounded mental health. People talk in whispers and look over their shoulder. They don't want anyone to hear them talking about something going on with their child. But yet, if I, knew that your child broke their leg and had surgery, I wouldn't hesitate, even in a public place, to say, Rachel, what doctor did you use? What therapy? How's he doing now? You wouldn't hesitate to tell me, what you tried and what worked. But when it comes to mental health, sometimes I don't know that your child has struggled, but even if I do, I would be so hesitant to ask about it. And you might be hesitant to share with me. So I saw that this was very different than a physical health issue. And I found that frustrating and unfair. I've always found writing as cathartic, and I'd always written. And I had recently had a few pieces published by Grown and Flown. So with that kind of underneath me, I sat down one day and wrote this post. I mean, when I tell you, it just came from like head to paper, just flowed so seamlessly. I wrote it and I cried when I was writing it, because I'd never been able to express myself so clearly about what we went through. And I first thought I would give it to Grown and Flown anonymously, just like you said, like, why didn't you say anonymous? And that would have been, you can do that. So I could have done that. But I thought this is going to have more impact if I use my name. Now, people are going to know it's one of my two sons if they know me. So I need to make sure that this is okay. So I called Will and I said, are you okay if I use my name? And he said, absolutely. He said, Mom, that would be great because people need to talk about it. And there's plenty of kids like me whose parents have no idea that they're going through this, and it could really help them. And it could give them hope because by then he was doing so well too. So I put it with my name on it. And then I thought of his Dear World photo. After we had dropped him at college, we were concerned, is he doing okay? College can be really stressful under the best of circumstances. And he was really just getting his feet under with the depression and the treatment. And we were concerned. He called one day and said, hey, we did this exercise during orientation where it's called Dear World, and you write with another person, you write in a few words your story on your body. And they take a photo. And he said, I want to send you the photo they took. And I said, oh, great. What does it say? And he said, I just want you to see it. So his dad and I opened the email, and there's Will standing there with his arm out. And on his arm is written, I can feel the daylight. And in his hand, it has the word again. And I can hardly
photo. It really is. I'm going to include it in the show links so the listeners can see it because it really is a moving photo. The fact that Will was so open to allowing, that's a really special person. And I got very teary-eyed here, imagining him tell you that. What a wonderful young man.
And that's what I was thinking. I was thinking, oh my gosh, here, not even 2 years ago, he couldn't even say the words barely to us. And now he's telling strangers his story. Because after you write these words, you tell in this group the significance. So he's telling strangers his story. And I thought, wow, he's come so far. More than me, he was so brave. And he was a warrior of, why shouldn't I talk about this? I didn't do anything wrong. There's nothing wrong with me. We need to talk. So I said, okay, Will, what would you think about me using the photo from Dear World? And he said, absolutely. And at this point, he hadn't even read the post. I said, I'd feel a lot better if you read the post and made sure what I said represents what happened. So he did, and he was fine with it. But Dear World was fantastic. I contacted them and asked them, and they said, sure, as long as we have photo credit, I'll send you a high resolution version. I mean, they were so cooperative. So Grown and Flown was thrilled.
I just want to say, when you see this image of Will, the light in his eyes, this again, it's kind of like this, as you said, warrior and brave sense coming through in this image. And, I can feel the light again. Is that what? Because
I can feel the daylight again.
I can feel the daylight again because he had felt like he was in the dark. It's a truly powerful image. And I am so happy for him and for you that this is something that you were able to discuss and share openly. Let's be honest, kids often don't love their parents sharing personal things about them, right? I mean, I've got teenage daughters. They don't want me to share much. And he understood that he could help get rid of the shame and stigma. And here he is getting ready to graduate. So that's fantastic.
Yeah. And in that photo, like you said, he's standing there with almost such pride. I have no shame here. So the post went out, went viral. All of these, just people, I can't even explain what happened after. I shared who Will's therapist at the time was with family and friends who asked. And she told me that there were 2 kids that came in with the post and said, my mom shared this with me. This is me and I want help. And I just thought, okay, this is what we wanted so badly, was for someone who was suffering alone to have hope and to ask for help. So, that led to, you had asked about CBS this morning, and I had submitted a piece that had nothing to do with depression, but I had submitted a writing piece for something else to them, a segment called Note to Self. And when they called me about it, they were narrowing it down to a couple of people to choose who the winner was. And I did not win that. And at first I was like, oh, that's a bummer. But I'd had several conversations with some of the producers, and I followed up in an email and said, I think we were brought together for a reason. If you ever decide to do a piece about teens and depression, my family would be more than willing to share our story. I didn't know if that would go anywhere. But within a few weeks, the producer reached out and said, would you and your son, your family be willing to do an on-camera interview? And I thought, I better check with Will. I didn't think it was going to go so far. So I reached out to Will. And by then I was having second thoughts, because writing a post and putting his photo is one thing, but being on TV and having someone interview you, asking you these very personal questions, and this going out to the entire country, that's a whole different level.
Yeah.
So I called Will and I said, here's what's happened. I'm already having second thoughts. I wasn't even going to call you and ask you. And he just stopped me, Rachel. And he said, Mom, we have to do that. We have to. Who's going to speak for people if we don't do it? Oh, I can hardly talk about it. Every time something has come up, I'm the one who starts getting protective and not wanting him to have more exposure, maybe not wanting me to have more exposure. And he's the one saying, Mom, we have to do this for everyone who can't speak up.
Yeah. Wise beyond his years. We had spoke before, and Will intentionally hid his depression from you because he didn't want to burden you. You had mentioned that your husband at some point in his life had some typical depression issues. So you kind of knew what that looked like looking at your husband. And you also had a friend who you mentioned whose child died by suicide, which is obviously incredibly tragic and just ripples through communities. So in your mind, you kind of knew what depression looked like there. This is kind of a hypothetical question, but why do you think that depression is not always what it looks like?
I thought I knew what depression was, like you said, based on my personal experiences. It looks like one thing to me, and that's just the tip of the iceberg of what it can look like. And when my friend died by suicide, it shocked the community because he was an all-American boy who had everything going for him. He was in college. He was thriving. His parents were actually in town for a wedding. He wasn't hopeless. He was talking about seeing them the next day. They had no indication. And that scared so many of us because it didn't look like depression. So when that happened, I remember talking to both of my sons. And at the time, they both said they didn't feel depressed. But I think it was a time when Will still really hadn't put words to what he was feeling. So I don't think he was intentionally lying. I think he just was thinking, no, I don't feel sad and hopeless. And I just feel nothing. I feel numb. That doesn't sound like depression. I don't know what it is. So I think we have to be very careful making assumptions about what depression looks like. I think we have to be careful when we say to our kids, if they express, hey, I'm struggling. Well, what do you have to be sad about? You had it so great. Oh, I had it so much harder when I was a kid. We have to be careful that we don't, just squash their feelings. And sometimes those little cries for help are actually the only way they know how to speak out. So I just can't tell you how many people have said, I had no idea. But when I started talking to my child, when I showed them your post, when I showed them the CBS segment, we started having a conversation and I found out they too were depressed or anxious or some other kind of mental health issue. Looking back, I've done a few talks and one woman made this suggestion that if I had young kids, I'm telling you, I would do this. She said she started taking her children to see a therapist every single year from the time they were young, like 6 or 7. And the way she presented it was, we go to your pediatrician every year for a checkup. We go to your therapist every year for a, mental health checkup. And in her mind, it made it was normal. Yeah. It was comfortable. And they're used to talking to someone. And if there's an issue, they go and see them more. Just like if you're sick, you go to your doctor more, you get medication. You go, if something's wrong, you tell your mom, hey, I need you to take me to the therapist more. And I think we have to find ways to normalize it because that's the only way I think that it's comfortable for a child to really be able to come forward with something so big.
And I want to thank you because you just taught me something. I go into classrooms for NAMI's Ending the Silence program and I talk to kids about warning signs. And one of the warning signs we talk about is if somebody doesn't want to get out of bed for a prolonged period, that could be a red flag for depression. But the truth is, here was Will getting up early every day. Here was this kid who was, like a scholar athlete and seemed to have everything going for him. Depression is not always as it seems, and we need to remember that. And again, checking in on the people that we think are the strongest sometimes need the most kind of love and attention. So I do like that reminder. So it was a trusted teacher who Will turned to. And, this teacher I'm sure you are beyond grateful for. And what, as a mental health advocate, what advice do you have to give to teachers, whether they be in middle school or high school or college, when it comes to their students' mental health?
I'm so glad you asked me that just the other day. And I would expand that to not just teachers, but coaches, mentors, because there are so many adult influencers. Yeah. And there's a lot of adult influencers in our kids' lives that can really impact this. And so, it's a huge responsibility when you're a teacher or a coach. But I want to share something that just happened the other day. So my husband is a lacrosse coach in addition to his stage. He's a lacrosse coach at the high school, and he coaches the JV team. But the varsity coach, who's not that far out of college, works a day job as well. And one of his colleagues, they had just found out, had died by suicide. And again, he was this guy who seemed to have everything going for him, great job, doing well, had a girlfriend, great family, all these things that we think should make you happy. And it shocked them all. So this coach in the huddle with his lacrosse players who are juniors and seniors in high school, he said, here's what has happened. And I can't tell you how shocked I am. And I have to say to each and every one of you, that whatever you're going through, please tell someone, ask for help. I'm here. Your parents are here. Find somebody that you can trust, but please don't keep it inside. Don't be ashamed. There's nothing for you to be ashamed of. My husband was watching this and he said he handled it so beautifully. And you could see these kids were listening very intently. I sent him a text later and said, you may have saved someone's life. You may never know the impact that you have, but just saying those words to these kids that admire you and look up to you could make all the difference.
Absolutely. And what I like to say is that asking for help is actually one of the strongest, bravest things you can do, because it means you want to live, you want to work, you want to get better, you're fighting for it, right?
Yeah.
So that's really great and really good advice. So when we spoke, and you mentioned a little about this earlier, but you mentioned how the healing process is often slow and gradual, right? Like things don't change overnight. Yeah. And that when Will left for school to go to university that was not close by, and he wanted to live in a single dorm room, you were a little bit nervous, as any parent would be, right? I have a junior, so I'm starting to think about all this, and just the thought of it, like so many emotions. Yeah. And you mentioned how you don't want to be that parent calling constantly and texting. It might be also you don't want to be the child or the daughter or the spouse or the friend, right? You don't want to overwhelm someone, and yet you want to connect. You had mentioned how you connected through lyrics, through music lyrics, and I really thought it was very touching. Can you just tell us just about that?
Yeah. So at some point we shared an iTunes account. So their music was on, was my music. I had access and I could tell, I know I didn't buy that song. That must be something one of my sons is listening to. And at the time I knew that Will listened a lot to Linkin Park. One of their songs, Numb, came on, and I stopped and pulled up the lyrics and listened very closely. And I thought, oh my gosh, okay, this is what he's trying to say. This is how he's feeling. And so I took the lyrics to him and I said, hey, I just listened to this song. Is this something that you relate to, that you connect with? And we talked about it. And again, I think when you use things that are kind of third party, like a meme or lyrics, and you can talk about them in that context, that it's so much easier than someone looking right in your face and saying, are you depressed? Or are you still sad? I mean, that's a lot more, that's a lot more forceful. But when you're talking about things and you're saying, is this you? Does this resonate with you? It really allows for a very open and honest conversation.
Well, and I love that. And that leads me to the next question, which is parents, or I could maybe even say spouses or children with their grown adult parents are often afraid to discuss difficult topics like depression and suicide because they're afraid that they're going to plant a seed, which I can tell you is never the case. And if you really are concerned about suicide, that is something that you just drop everything and ask immediately. But I would love to hear from you why talking so openly and having these uncomfortable and difficult conversations is so important.
Yeah, and you're right. I've heard people hesitate to talk to their kids because they'll say, but if they're not anxious and I talk about it, I'm going to make them anxious, or it's going to make them think about being anxious. And as you said, talking about it definitely doesn't make it manifest. It just puts words to what they're feeling. And that's really the first step for them to be able to ask for help. It was so important. And I think because we kept having these venues where we were going to be public and we were going to be talking and telling his story again, it really allowed us to have some very just, no walls conversations about what was going on in our lives. And when we got ready to do the CBS interview and Mark Strausman sitting in the other room and ready to talk to us, I said to Will, he said, don't tell me you're getting cold feet. And I said, oh, I'm just afraid he's going to ask something that sheds this in a bad light. Or he said, Mom, he's ready. We had talked to him. He seemed like the nicest guy. And he said, we're just going to talk to him like he's a friend. And we're just going to tell him our story and just keep remembering that we're going to help people who are suffering alone, and we're going to give them hope. So again, he's like, pep talking and coaching me because I'm feeling mom protective, and he's not. He's being as brave and courageous as can be. And he was absolutely right. When Mark said, okay, we've got enough footage, I thought, oh my gosh, how long have we been here? Because it just felt so comfortable just talking about it. And I think that's where we all have to get with mental health, where I'm not whispering to you and I'm not afraid to say, yes, Rachel, if you have a friend who wants to talk to me about what happened to my son, give them my name. It's fine. We have to get to that point where we're as comfortable talking about it, a mental health issue, as we are a physical health issue. And that only comes with continued dialogue and organizations like NAMI that you're part of, and, celebrities who have a platform, and people like you who have a platform who can speak out and say, you did nothing wrong. There's nothing to be ashamed of. And until we start talking, we're going to have these statistics on suicide that are just heartbreaking, especially in our teens and young adults.
I was just going to say that. I mean, part of me feels like I just went on a college tour with my daughter, and the tour guide was talking about all the mental health facilities and how important mental health is. And I was just so grateful to hear that. And yet our kids are feeling more anxious and depression is on the rise. So thank goodness we're talking more about it. We just need to, as a society, figure out how to kind of have less anxiety and depression. But, maybe it is because we're talking more and we're recognizing it more. But I am so grateful for people like you that are helping others. And you had mentioned to me how there was a man that you met with who had reached out to you and he had lost his parents, and how this really affected you so deeply. Can you tell us about this moving story?
Yeah. So in addition to parents saying, hey, can I talk to you because I think my child's depressed? And I had to say, I'm not a therapist, but I can tell you what happened with us.
Absolutely, I'm not
and
either.
I can recommend people.
Right.
But in addition to those kind of reactions, I had also posted this on LinkedIn, which, really is mostly business and it's not Facebook. I get that, but I felt like the message was really important. And I wanted to reach some of my colleagues who had kids who may not be on Facebook. So I posted it there. A man reached out to me. He happened to live in our community, but he reached out to me And he said, basically in his post, and I subsequently spoke to him in person, but he said, I can't tell you what your post did for me. I was your son, but I grew up in a time and with parents who could not understand how a teenager could be depressed, and they were not capable of helping me. But the unconditional love and the fact that you have no judgment on your son and the way that you handled this has healed me. I feel like I got the unconditional love from a mom that I didn't get from my own mom. And I can't thank you enough because this has changed my life. And I thought, oh my gosh, I know a grown man who still was trying to reconcile his childhood saying, this changed me. I never expected that.
The power of the love from a mother too, right? I mean,
yeah, right?
We can be such warriors for our kids, and we should be warriors for our kids. Well, that's beautiful. And isn't it wonderful when people reach out, it makes it all worthwhile. Not that we're doing this because of that. We're doing this because we want to, again, rid the stigma and shame. But it is really wonderful to hear that, you're putting your blood, sweat, and tears into this.
Yeah, and it does fuel you when you get comments and people saying, keep doing what you're doing, Rachel, your podcasts are making a difference. It fuels you to say, okay, I'm on the right direction. I got to keep doing this. Even when I feel hesitant, I got to keep moving forward. Yeah.
That's right. And clearly that's what Will is feeling. So good for him.
Yeah.
Really. And you and I, it's obvious we're kindred spirits because we both want to bring hope to families, right? Yeah. This isn't just about our kids or people suffering. It's also about families. You had mentioned that you are in the process of writing a book. And do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. After we were on CBS, we came back a second time. They invited us back. I have to say CBS this morning, big kudos, because they have a mission to help stop the stigma is what they call it. And they did a town hall, which they had people talking openly about depression, and they had invited us to be part of that. And so it has given us fuel to say, we need to keep reaching people. And the only way I can describe this is that Will had been home for a month at Christmas time. So we had a lot of time together. And as he was going back to the airport, we were in the car and I said, hey, Will, I woke up this morning and I feel compelled to write a book about our journey. And I don't want you to say anything yet, but I just want you to think about that, just kind of take that in. I want to know if you would be open to writing with me. And I said that, Rachel, because his writing is beautiful. I mean, his writing brings me to tears. The way he describes things just puts you right where he is. So he was like, absolutely. And I said, well, just, think about it. And my husband, this time he was the protector, and he said, Will, what if this was really big? Are you sure you want to do this? Are you still okay with this? And he said, yeah, Dad, we need to do this. We need more people to have hope because, our story is a story of hope because Will is really thriving. And I will just, as an aside, say that one time when I went to visit him, I kind of wanted to have this grand delusion that he didn't have depression anymore. And I didn't have to worry about him ever again. And I knew logically that's not how it works. But when I saw him, I kind of shared that and he kind of laughed and he said, Mom, I'm going to have this the rest of my life. But here's why I know I'm better, because I know what to do if I feel like I'm spiraling down. I have coping mechanisms. I journal, I meditate, I go for a run. All of these things that I know now, and I can recognize when I need to do those things. I'm going to live with this for the rest of my life, and it's okay because I now see this as a gift, which I have to tell you shocked me because that certainly wasn't the word I would use to describe it. He did. He said it made me look inward. It made me really know myself, and it made me really realize who my friends were, and it made me realize how many other people are like me. So we had really come very far from that first night to this conversation. So in fact, I just spoke to him over the weekend and I said, have you given some thought to, wanting to write the book with me? Do you want to co-author or just contribute or I don't know, just put a note in there? And he said, yeah, I want to write it with you, I think. And I really, Rachel, I feel so strongly that his voice is 10 times more powerful than mine. And I think people need to hear his perspective and his voice of hope.
Well, and Will is in his early 20s, and to be that self-aware at that age is a gift, right? That's something that I feel like I'm just gaining now, right? So that's
right. I know.
Fantastic. Okay.
I feel the same way. I look at him sometimes and I think that too. Go ahead.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, the pride that you must feel is wonderful. Last two questions. This is a question I ask all my guests, and it's, if you could write your younger 20-year-old, dear Tracy, just a love letter, what would it say knowing what you know now?
I have to tell you, when I did this CBS piece, it was called Note to Self, and it was a love letter to your younger self. So if you don't mind, I can read it to you.
I would love that. Perfect.
So it says, you may not have everything you want, but you will always have everything you need. Wear your seatbelt no matter what. You were very fortunate that you climbed out of that totaled car and walked away. When you won Miss Congeniality in the teen beauty pageant, you were disappointed. It will take years for you to understand that wasn't the consolation prize. That was the real prize. In high school, you'll think you're in love. When he's furious, shoves you and screams, no one else will ever love you the way I do, believe him and run. You are entering dangerous territory. A real man does not want to control you or compete with you. He wants you to shine. Be glad that mom drilled into your head that you had to be able to support yourself first before you could get married. Stay because you want to, not because you have to. Always follow your heart. It's the reason you got married after knowing him for just 6 months. You listened, and it's been 28 years at that time. Those 2 boys will be your heart and soul. You weren't sure about having another because you thought you could never love another child like you loved the first one. Love isn't finite. Love expands. When your son asks, Mom, can we talk? Stop everything and listen. It's important. Now go out there and help other young women understand the value of self-worth and the payoff of going for it. Okay, Tracy, you made me cry. It's really beautiful. And I could relate to seriously everything you just said. Truly, truly beautiful. Thank you. Do you have any happiness habits? Is there anything that you do that grounds you and brings you happiness? Oh, I'm so glad you asked me that. I have to tell you, I have had this in the last 6 months, this unsuppressed urge to spread kindness. And it's not that I hadn't been kind before, but it was more inward, my family, my friends. After being through this with Will, after people coming to me and saying, of what they're dealing with, I think you said this at the beginning, you just don't know what people are dealing with in their lives. Just because they smile and they talk and they seem okay doesn't mean they are. And so I have been finding ways to outwardly spread kindness. And I can't tell you, you probably know that when you're kind to someone else, the way it makes you feel is there's just nothing like it. And I just wanted to say real quick, one of the ways I found to do this that has had a huge impact on me and on our community is I found a nonprofit. So they do this with not making money. And it's called Don't Give Up Signs. That's their website, don'tgiveupsigns.com. They make yard signs. They also make stickers and other things. On every sign, it says, don't give up on one side. On the other side, it says things like, you're not alone. Your mistakes do not define you. You are worthy of love. You are enough. All these positive, just very simple white sign, black writing. And we have put them out throughout the community, and the responses on Facebook and things like Nextdoor, the app Nextdoor, the comments on there, and people have left notes and mailboxes, and they say things like, nobody knows how sad I am. I lost my father. I can barely get through the day. And I saw your sign that says one day at a time. I don't know why you put that in your yard, but all I can tell you is it changed my whole day. I put one near the high school, the local high school, that says, your mistakes do not define you. And it says, don't give up on the other side. And people have been saying, I see that every day. One person said, my son was going back to college after being home. And he said when he got back, he was going to start seeing a therapist, that he did not want to give up and that he wanted to get better. And he said it was the sign that told him, he needed to do something. So I guess that's a long way to say one of the things that I've found is a way to spread kindness to other people, because you really do not know what is going on behind the walls of someone's home and what's going on inside someone's head and someone's heart. And when you show kindness like that, you have no idea the impact you can make on people.
Wow, that is powerful, Tracy. I love that you're doing that. And I have a feeling you're probably going to inspire others to do that. That's beautiful. Where can the listeners find you? I'll have links in the show notes to your Instagram and your Twitter. Yeah,
that's Instagram and Twitter, Facebook as well.
Okay,
but I do post. Yeah.
And then I'll have your Grown and Flown essay link. And
yeah,
wonderful. Well, I just want to thank you so much. Truly, you have inspired me. You brought me to tears. You made me smile. I know you're going to do the same for everyone listening. And Will, if you're listening, I want to thank you for being a ray of light and guiding us, because you are really special and your parents have a lot to be proud of.
Thank you. And thank you again for having me. I love what you're doing. It is so needed in the world, and it's really had an impact on me. So I appreciate that you're, letting me be part of this. And thank you.
Oh my God, it's really my pleasure. Okay, Tracy, well, we'll speak soon. You take care.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
This is Rachel Steinman. For more information or to contact me with any questions, comments, or guest ideas, please check out rightnowrachel.com. That's right with a W. Thank you so much for listening, subscribing, and sharing, dear family. And if you found value in what you've just heard, I would love and so appreciate a great review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Until next time, I wish you love, happiness, and good mental health.